I was 30 winters old when whispers swirled. Amelia Carter? Sweet girl. But she'll never settle. Marriage material she's not. I grew up in Rosewood, a New England town of cobblestone streets and Sunday polite nods, but behind the beauty hide barbs. My mother sewed lace for debutantes, my father worked as a church organist, and I grew up learning two things, kindness and silence, as if speaking less gave me more dignity. Then came Jonathan Mitchell, heir to Mitchell and Sons Realty, tall, handsome, the kind of man a dozen daughters dreamed of catching at the harvest ball. He spotted me in the church choir loft, voice pure and clear, and started sending flowers with small hopeful notes. Your voice changed the anthem for me. He walked me home under lantern glow and told me dreams were built by people with open hearts, not perfect pedigrees. They courted through autumn and winter. Family saw promise. Society saw oddity. They whispered, "Jonathan, darling, she's talented, but not fit for our world." My cheeks burned, but I swallowed the sting and plaited more Sundays, more smiles. I believed, until Thanksgiving, when Jonathan's mother invited me to the Milford charity ball, but only as a performer, not a guest. She insisted I sing, then bow out. She offered me a scholarship, no ring. On December 1st, I found out he'd accepted his cousin's engagement, Emily Prescott, daughter of the bank president, blonde, composed, proper perfume over piano. I cuttingly realized they'd never seen me as potential wife. I said our engagement as a future fact, not a hope based on tenderness, not favor, but on the night of the Milford charity ball, held in a $2.5 million old townhouse turned ballroom, I performed as expected. After my last note, they clapped. Politely, I bowed politely. I left quietly. In my glove pocket lay the glass slipper I'd planned to leave, hoping Jonathan would chase, but he'd drop to one knee before her, not me. My heart shattered like fine crystal. For 3 days I cried by candlelight, unsure how to rise. Then I told myself, if they think I'm not marriage material, then I'll build a ballroom all my own and fill it with giving, not gossip. So I began. I sold my savings, bargained for credit, and found that hidden gem, the old Everett Estate ballroom, priced at $2.5 million, steep, shimmering, unused. Once, it hosted the town's grandest balls. Then it fell to ruin. No candles, no music, no love. I visited it after closing midnight, lantern in hand. I walked the cracked marble floors and saw them not as relics, but as a stage. The balconies, not as pitfalls, but as promise. I swore to myself, they said I'd never be worth a ring, but I'll build something more precious than gold, a place to give hearts a reason. I stood in the center of the forgotten Everett Estate ballroom, letting the moonlight filter through the shattered glass windows. Dust lay thick like time. Itself had pressed pause on this place. But in my eyes, I didn't see ruin, I saw redemption. Not for them. For me. The price was steep. $2.5 million. I had nowhere near that kind of money, not even a tenth. But I had something they didn't expect from a choir girl who once sang for breadcrumbs and blessings. Fire. That, and a secret talent for numbers. Years before Jonathan, I worked behind the scenes for a retired bookkeeper named Mr. Vaughn. He'd taught me the art of balancing ledgers, of reading between rows of debt and opportunity. While others gossiped, I listened and learned. And now, I would use that knowledge to craft my comeback. I started small. I took every spare dollar from my singing gigs, my sewing, even baking for the parish fair, and I invested, carefully, silently. While they danced in their gowns, I built portfolios in silence. 5 months after the betrayal, I partnered with a widow named Eleanor Hartley. She owned a chain of struggling bed and breakfasts and was weeks from losing them. I proposed a bold idea. I'd restructure her finances and market the inns to traveling choirs and artists. In return, I'd receive equity, not cash. She laughed, at first, but desperation has a way of accepting miracles. Within a year, we'd tripled her profits. By year 2, I co-owned 4 inns across Vermont and New Hampshire. Every time I signed a deed, I thought, one step closer to the ballroom. Meanwhile, I stayed in Rosewood, visible only enough to not raise suspicion. I still sang on Sundays, still smiled at the same judgmental matrons, including Judith Mitchell, Jonathan's mother. She'd nod politely, still believing I'd vanished into disappointment. Little did she know, I was becoming exactly what they feared, a woman who didn't need their approval. One evening, as I walked past the Mitchell family home, I noticed it glittered with wedding photos of Jonathan and Emily. My stomach didn't twist anymore. In fact, I almost pitied them. They'd married titles, not truths. By my 31st birthday, I had enough. Not just the money, the strength, the grace. I called the estate broker and offered full cash for the Everett estate. He thought I was joking. I wired the money the same it was mine. I walked through its grand archways again, but this time with an architect, a florist, and a vision. I would restore it not for parties but for purpose. I would host the first Rosewood Winter Charity Gala, inviting every orphanage, every struggling widow, every artist who had once been told they didn't belong. And yes, I'd invite the Mitchells too. I wanted them to see what not marriage material could become. The ballroom restoration took nearly 8 months, and every step felt like stitching together a broken heart with gold thread. The once crumbling chandeliers now sparkled with imported crystal. The faded oak panels were sanded, polished, reborn. Velvet curtains from France, gold-framed mirrors from auctions I used to only dream of attending. Every inch of the Everett estate ballroom whispered of elegance, but more than that, it screamed rebirth. While the town whispered about the mysterious new owner, I kept my identity close like a card tucked behind a glove. No one suspected that the girl who once served punch at the side table now owned the place they were desperate to rent. I hosted small teas for donors, afternoon rehearsals for orphan children who had never seen a stage. I brought in local artists to paint the halls and elderly seamstresses to stitch the curtains. I wanted every soul once dismissed to now belong. Then came December. The Rosewood Winter Charity Gala was officially announced on the front page of the Rosewood Weekly. Invitations were printed on ivory parchment, sealed with gold wax, and hand-delivered. One arrived at the doorstep of the Mitchell estate. "You're really inviting them?" Eleanor asked me over tea. I sipped calmly. "Absolutely. Because people like them always assume they're above forgiveness and never suspect they're the lesson." 2 weeks before the gala, my name finally became known. Amelia Carter, proprietor of the Everett Ballroom. The whispers began again. How did she buy it? She must have found a husband after all. No, I heard she inherited money. She's just doing this to get attention. I let them wonder. Then came Jonathan. He arrived at the ballroom unannounced one afternoon. I was reviewing floral arrangements when the door opened, and there he stood, older, still handsome, but now dulled by disappointment. "Amelia," he said, his voice hushed. "Is it really true? You own this place?" I looked up from the flower samples. "Yes, Jonathan, I do." He smiled awkwardly. "I was surprised to see your name. Emily and I were invited. I just wanted to say congratulations. It's beautiful." I didn't smile. "Thank you. The gala's not about beauty though. It's about purpose." There was a long silence. He shifted. "You know, I always believed in you." Now I did smile, but not kindly. "You believed in me, until your mother told you not to." His face flushed. "That's not fair, isn't it?" He stared, then looked down. "I'm sorry, Amelia. Don't be. You gave me exactly what I needed, motivation." He turned to leave, then hesitated. "Do you think we could talk sometime?" I looked around the glowing ballroom. "We're talking now," and I turned back to my work. The night of the gala arrived with frost in the air and strings of gold lights wrapping every oak tree. Guests arrived in velvet and lace, their carriages lining the cobblestone like a parade of privilege. But inside the ballroom, I made sure the first to walk the red carpet were orphans, then widows, then the seamstresses and painters. They came in humble gowns and shining eyes, and they were treated as royalty. The Mitchells entered last. Jonathan's mother wore a pearl dress and an expression like she'd sucked a lemon. Emily clung to Jonathan's arm, looking uncertain. They expected to be led to the front. Instead, I greeted them politely, thanked them for coming, and seated them at table 23, near the back. I didn't do it to humiliate them. I did it to show them this event was not theirs. The gala was more than a spectacle, it was a statement. The crystal chandeliers swayed gently above as string quartets played carols that echoed softly through the hall. Tables brimmed with honey roasted ham, mulled cider, and cranberry tarts made by bakers who once couldn't afford their own ovens. Children from the orphanage wore custom-stitched outfits, their names embroidered on the cuffs, beaming with a pride no price could buy. I made my entrance late, just as the music quieted. All eyes turned. The girl once dismissed in hand-me-downs now stood at the top of the grand staircase, wearing a deep sapphire velvet gown, hand-stitched by the same seamstress, Mrs. Mitchell, once called peasant trash. Gasps followed as I descended. The orphans clapped, the donors nodded, but the Mitchells? They sat frozen, lips thin as paper. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, standing at the podium that overlooked the room. Tonight is not about proving anyone wrong. It's about proving to ourselves that we belong at the table too. I paused, letting the words hang. This estate once hosted dances for debutantes. Now, it dances for dignity, for the invisible, the outcast, the forgotten. Tears filled more than a few eyes. I saw Eleanor Hartley squeeze the hand of a child beside her. The mayor dabbed his cheeks. Even the cook from Rosewood Elementary stood in the back, beaming like her child had just graduated from Harvard. The applause was thunderous. As the night unfolded, people didn't talk about who wore what or who sat where. They talked about the spirit of the night, but one guest was still clinging to the past. Jonathan cornered me near the library hallway, away from the crowd. I'm proud of you, he said quietly. You've said that, I replied, offering only a polite smile. I made a mistake, Amelia. Yes, I nodded. You did. He stepped closer. I married someone who looks good in pictures but doesn't see me. She doesn't know how to talk about dreams, or how to sit in silence without needing to be the center. And now you realize you had that with me? He hesitated, then nodded. I do. I let out a breath. Jonathan, what you broke wasn't just trust. It was belief. I believed in you. And in some odd way, I'm glad you let me down. Why? Because your absence taught me how to be my own hero. His shoulders dropped. For a moment, he didn't have a reply. You still wear the necklace I gave you. I touched the small silver chain at my collarbone. It reminds me not of you, but of who I was when I thought love was the only way to be somebody. Silence. He looked at me like he was trying to remember the words to a hymn he no longer believed in. Then, I smiled gently. You should rejoin your wife. He nodded slowly. Take care of yourself, Amelia. I already do. Back in the ballroom, I invited the orphans to lead the first dance. The littlest girl, Lisa, age 6, climbed into my arms and I twirled her across the floor, her laughter ringing out like bells. Guests rose. Donors followed. Even the mayor joined the waltz. The Mitchells sat awkwardly, watching a world they used to rule now move without their permission. And I danced not with revenge in my heart, but release. By morning, the town of Rosewood buzzed like a beehive after a summer storm. The Rosewood Weekly Chronicle splashed a photo across its front page. Outcast to owner, Amelia Carter hosts most inclusive gala in Rosewood history. Beneath the image was a wide-angle shot of me standing on the ballroom steps, surrounded by orphans and elder women, a sea of unlikely elegance blooming behind me. The editor had interviewed several guests. Quotes like "she's the future of this town" and "I'd trust Amelia Carter with anything" dotted the column like pearls on lace, but it was the final sentence that caught the Mitchells' attention. Rumor has it, the Everett Estate's new owner is eyeing a seat on Rosewood City Committee. That line set fire to their breakfast table. I knew because later that day, Eleanor Hartley came by the ballroom, grinning like a fox in the henhouse. "They're rattled," she said, her gloved fingers stirring tea. Margaret Mitchell sent a letter to the editorial board demanding a retraction, said it was socially irresponsible to spread political speculation. I laughed. Let her write. My actions will speak louder. And they did. Within a week, I hosted a winter reading camp for children with learning difficulties using rooms in the ballroom's east wing. Volunteers showed up in droves. Bakers sent snacks. The mayor even brought his grandson to read with the group. That Sunday, I received a letter from Mrs. Greta Wells, the wealthiest widow in Rosewood. Dear Miss Carter, I never liked the Mitchells much. Their hearts were too tight and their smiles too forced. I'd like to sponsor your next charity event on one condition: that you don't ever let their coldness steal your warmth. Sincerely, Greta Wells. Check enclosed was for $50,000. I was building something bigger than revenge. I was building a legacy. Then came the twist I never expected. A man named Harold Bexley, owner of Rosewood's most notorious real estate firm, requested a meeting. He was known for buying up old inns, flipping properties, and turning farmland into shopping plazas. I expected him to offer to buy the ballroom. Instead, he slid a folder across the table. Miss Carter, he said, I want you to join our board. You've got an eye for value, not just financial, but human. I blinked. I'm not a developer. You're something better. You're a builder. I didn't answer right away. My hands traced the edge of the folder as my mind flashed back to every moment I was told I wouldn't be anything without a husband. That no one would take a woman seriously unless she was escorted by a man in a tailored suit. Now, I was being invited to sit at a table once close to me, not as a date, not as decoration, but as a decision maker. I'll think about it, I said, rising from the table with a smile, and Harold Bexley tipped his hat. That's all I ask. Back at the ballroom, I walked the corridors alone, soaking in the silence. Each frame, each painting, each drape had a story. My story. That evening, I held a small gathering in the grand room, not for donors, not for press, just for the children and the widows, the painters and the bakers. We lit candles and sang carols. We shared stories and pies. No gowns, no speeches, no chandeliers needed, just heart. And in the back of the room, unnoticed at first, stood Jonathan Mitchell. His coat was dusted with snow. He didn't step forward. He just stood there watching. I didn't invite him in, because some doors, once closed, aren't meant to be reopened. The letter arrived just after New Year's, cream-colored envelope, heavy parchment, Rosewood City seal embossed in gold. My heart paused mid-beat as I opened it, sitting by the ballroom's frost-laced window. Dear Miss Amelia Carter, you are formally invited to serve as the guest speaker at the Rosewood Women's League Annual Winter Forum. Your contributions to the community, leadership and philanthropy, and example of resilience represent the very spirit our town needs. We hope you will accept this honor. Warmest regards, Rebecca Langley, chairwoman. For a moment, I didn't breathe. The same women's league that once barred my mother from entry now wanted me center stage. My mother. I clutched the letter to my chest. If only she could see me now. The day of the forum arrived with clear skies and soft winds. I wore a charcoal dress with satin cuffs, my hair pinned like the women in my grandmother's old portraits. No sparkle, no frill, just quiet strength. As I stepped onto the stage in the Old Town Assembly Hall, 100 pairs of eyes watched me, some curious, some admiring, and a few calculating. Margaret Mitchell sat near the front, arms crossed, eyes cold. I smiled directly at her. Then I began. Ladies of Rosewood, I said, voice steady. I was once told that a woman's place is in the home. I believe that's true if it's a home she chooses, builds, and owns outright. A few chuckles, one or two gasps. I was told I'd never be marriage material, that I was too strong-willed, too ambitious, too loud. But I've come to realize something: loud women light the way for those still finding their voice. That got applause. And somewhere in the back, I saw Eleanor Hartley beam like she'd just watched a storm part into sunbeams. I didn't get here with luck, I continued. I got here because I was underestimated, and I used that as fuel. Because when people try to silence you, you learn to sing louder. I ended with a quote from my mother. She once said, Amelia, if the door's closed, build your own house and invite the whole town. So that's what I did. Standing ovation. The same room that once whispered behind my back now echoed with applause. Later that evening, I returned to the ballroom, my heels echoing across polished marble. A courier had left another envelope on the foyer table. This one wasn't elegant. It was crumpled, addressed in shaky penmanship. It read, Amelia, I saw you today at the forum. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know I was wrong. I married a woman who looked the part but never played it. And I lost the only person who ever truly saw me. You don't owe me anything. Just know that I think of you, and what we might have been. Jonathani stared at the note. 5 Christmases ago, his words might have broken me. Now, they barely moved the air around me. I folded the paper neatly and slid it into the fireplace. Watched it curl into ash. I had made peace with the past. It had no hold on me now. 3 days later, I met with Harold Bexley again. I'll join your board, I said, extending my hand. His eyebrows lifted. Really? But on one condition, I added. Half of our projects must involve community restoration, not just profit. I want homes rebuilt, parks reopened, libraries revived. He didn't hesitate. Deal. We shook hands, and just like that, I became the first woman under 40 to sit on the Bexley Real Estate Advisory Board. They gave me an office with a brass nameplate, but every morning, I still returned to the ballroom first, to check on the orphans, to greet the cooks, to open the velvet curtains and let the sun in, because no matter how far I climbed, I'd never forget where my roots grew. By the end of February, the ballroom was more than a building, it was a heartbeat. Every week, new ideas blossomed inside its walls. A morning class for young mothers, a weekend sewing circle for widows, a music hour where an old jazz pianist played melodies that made even the coldest days feel warm. People stopped calling it the Everett Estate. Now, they just called it Amelia's Hall. And yet, there was still a shadow that lingered. The Mitchell family hadn't spoken to me since the forum, but their silence was far from surrender. I'd heard whispers Margaret was pushing for new city policies that would regulate public gatherings, specifically those held in privately repurposed estates. It was a thinly veiled attack. She wanted the ballroom shut down, but I was ready. One chilly March morning, I received a summons. I was to appear before the city licensing committee to discuss the future role of my ballroom. I didn't flinch. Instead, I went straight to Eleanor Hartley. I'll need city permits, public safety endorsements, and testimonials, I told her. Think we can get all that by Thursday? She smiled, flipping open her legal notebook. By Wednesday noon, by Wednesday at 10, we had a stack of endorsements so thick it needed ribbon. Letters from teachers, clergy, local shop owners. Even a blind librarian who said the ballroom's reading program brought him the greatest joy of his week. But it was the handwritten one from young Lucy Pritchard, age 9, that I tucked in my coat pocket. Dear city people, Miss Amelia lets me read and eat muffins and learn violin. Please don't take her house away. I love it more than recess. Love, Lucy. Thursday arrived like a storm in waiting. The committee meeting was held in the old courthouse, mahogany benches, stained glass windows, and a whole row of reporters. Margaret Mitchell sat primly in the front row, wearing her infamous red feathered hat. She didn't look at me, but her smirk was impossible to ignore. I was called to speak. I stood tall, papers in hand, voice clear. My name is Amelia Carter. I am 31 years old, and 5 years ago, I was laughed out of this town's Christmas ball for not being worthy. Today, I own the building it was once held in. But more than that, I've opened its doors to everyone who was ever made to feel small in Rosewood. I handed over the permits, the endorsements, Lucy's letter. The head of the committee glanced through them, nodding slowly. Margaret rose. I object to this theater, she snapped. Rosewood needs rules, not redemption stories. I turned to her, calm as still water. You want rules? Here's one. When you shut people out, don't be surprised when they build something stronger without you. Silence. Then, a soft clap from the back row, followed by more. By the time the committee chair announced that Amelia's Hall would be granted permanent status as a community cultural center, the room was standing in applause. Margaret stormed out. I didn't watch her go. I was too busy shaking hands with the committee, too busy rising. Later that night, I stood outside the ballroom, watching families arrive for our first spring celebration night. An idea from the children. I saw lanterns float above the garden, heard laughter echo through the halls I once feared would collapse in silence. Eleanor came up beside me, holding 2 mugs of cider. You've changed everything, she said. No, I whispered. They did. I just gave them keys. Then we toasted. To light, to legacy, to a ballroom that was once a prison of memories and now a palace of purpose. The seasons changed quickly after the courtroom victory. By April, the orchard beside the ballroom bloomed with pink blossoms that fluttered down like confetti after a parade. The children started calling them Amelia's petals, and somehow, the name stuck. I never corrected them. But beneath the joy, something stirred. A quiet question that haunted me in the silence between music lessons and town hall meetings. Was this enough? You see, revenge is never the end of a story, it's just the turning of a page. I had reclaimed my dignity, my name, even the very floor they once said I wasn't good enough to dance upon. And yet, I felt unfinished. It all changed the night I received a letter marked in embossed gold from the Everett Estate auctioneers. Inside, a list of the original ballroom's historical assets, mirrors, paintings, even a baby grand piano that once belonged to a Civil War general's daughter, all of it, stored in private warehouses. For sale. I blinked. These weren't just objects, they were memories. They belonged here, with the people, not in some vault owned by the wealthy elite. So I did what I always do when someone tells me I can't. I bid on every single item. By mid-May, the ballroom began to transform into what it always should have been, a living museum of Rosewood's past, rebuilt by the people who were once never allowed to enter. The piano was tuned by a blind veteran named Hank. The chandelier was restored by a single mother who used to scrub floors in that very hall. And the grand mirror? That was hung by the same man who once installed windows for the Mitchell family. Before they refused to pay him. It was poetic justice. Strung together by hammer, sweat, and grace, we reopened with a summer gala. Not a ball or a fundraiser, just a celebration. Old and young, rich and poor, black and white, arm in arm. They danced where I once stood alone, and for the first time since that cursed Christmas gala years ago, I cried, not for sadness, but for release. That same week, I got a call from Jonathan. Yes, that Jonathan. The one who once stood under a garland arch and told another girl he'd found his future. Now, he asked if we could talk. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. Instead, I invited him to the public speaking workshop I held every Wednesday at the Ballroom. To my surprise, he showed up. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He simply watched, listened, and at the end, he stayed behind, saying, "I never saw what you were building. I see it now." I nodded. "That's because you were always looking down on it," I replied. He chuckled sadly, then left. That was the last time I saw him, and it was enough. One morning in June, I stood alone in the ballroom before the day's bustle. The sunlight filtered through stained glass, casting blues and golds across the floor. I thought about every insult I'd swallowed like thorns, every whisper behind closed doors, every man who thought my value could be weighed in silence. But most of all, I thought of one line I'd heard in that ballroom years ago. "She's not one of us. She doesn't belong." And now, my name was carved in brass outside the front door. Amelia Carter Cultural Hall, a place for all. They had tried to lock me out. So I bought the house, turned the keys, and opened every door they'd ever closed. By the time July arrived, the ballroom no longer belonged to history, it belonged to the present. Children chased fireflies under the moonlight, poets read under the oak trees, and veterans led storytelling nights in rooms that once echoed with the clink of champagne glasses reserved for the elite. But with new light, old shadows always find a way to slither back in. One morning, Eleanor came in holding the local paper. "Page 4, she said flatly, placing it on my desk. The headline read, "Mitchell heir to launch luxury resort cultural hall sits in proposed redevelopment." Zonomy fingers tightened around the paper. The Mitchells hadn't forgotten, and now they were trying again, this time, not with whispers or courtrooms, but with bulldozers and blueprints. They wanted to erase it all. Eleanor leaned over. "They filed intent with the city. Rezoning hearings begin next week. They'll offer to buy out the land, mark it unfit, call it outdated. And if I don't sell, they'll try to force eminent domain," she whispered. I stood slowly. "Then they'll have to fight for it. And this time, I'm not alone." That week, I called everyone: teachers, carpenters, librarians, florists, veterans, and street vendors. One by one, I gathered stories not just about the ballroom, but about what it meant. Every voice mattered. Lucy, now age 10, gave me a drawing she made of the ballroom surrounded by stick figures holding hands. Above it, she'd written in crooked block letters, "No one can buy kindness or steal it." I scanned the image and printed 1,000 copies. We used them as flyers, as posters, as handouts at the town market, everywhere. By the time the hearing arrived, the line to enter the town hall stretched to blocks. The Mitchells came in through the back entrance, flanked by lawyers and real estate developers in shiny shoes. But I came with Rosewood. Inside the courtroom, I stood once more behind the same oak podium where I had defended the ballroom months earlier. "My name is Amelia Carter," I began, steady and strong. "I am 31 years old. This land, this hall, was once a symbol of exclusion. Now, it's a beacon of inclusion. And what they want to build in its place is not luxury, it's erasure." Behind me, Mrs. Langford, 84 years old and former ballroom cleaning staff, rose next. "This is the first time I've walked in this room through the front door," she said, eyes wet. "Don't take it from us now." One by one, the room became a choir of memory. A blind man who found purpose teaching music. A teenage boy who avoided gangs because of weekly chess club. A woman who met her future husband during a poetry night. Even city officials blinked back tears. When the vote was finally called, there was no suspense, unanimous. The ballroom and every foot of its land was declared a protected cultural landmark. The Mitchell proposal was not just denied. It was laughed out of the room, and when Margaret stood, her mouth pressed into a line, I looked at her calmly. You built a dynasty on closing doors, I said. I opened one and built a world. She turned, walked out, heels echoing. That night, I returned to the ballroom, alone, for a while. I sat in the middle of the floor, eyes closed, and then, a soft knock. It was Mr. Dobbins, the local baker, holding a cake. He smiled. Heard you won. Thought the queen needed a crown. On the cake were the words, to Amelia. She made space where there was none. We shared a laugh and a slice. That was the thing about this place now. There were no guests, only family. Summer in Rosewood carried the scent of jasmine and redemption. The ballroom, now officially known as the Amelia Carter Cultural Hall, thrived. Like an old soul awakened, we added a rooftop garden. Children's art lined the hallway. The weekly poetry slam was booked out to months in advance. And the once icy marble floors? Warmed by the laughter and life they were never meant to host. But even in peace, the echoes of the past linger. Sometimes I'd catch myself staring at the grand windows late at night, remembering what it felt like to be small, forgotten, mocked. They had said I wasn't ballroom material, that I wasn't marriage material, that I'd never be more than the girl from the wrong side of the orchard. But now, I owned the orchard, and I used its fruits to bake pies for the annual fundraiser for orphan children. Yes, orphans, you. See, last Christmas, I donated every dollar I earned from the ballroom's first gala to purchase an abandoned brick building down the road. It had once been a storage unit for wine and silks. Now, it was home to 16 children who had nowhere to go. I named it Evergreen Home. The girls there braid one another's hair by candlelight. The boys build wooden toys and dream of flying. They don't know much about revenge, or money, or betrayal, but they know warmth and safety. That, more than anything, is my victory. On Christmas Eve, I hosted a special gathering in the ballroom, a night just for the children, the elderly, the ones who'd once stood on the edge of Rosewood's holiday lights with noses pressed against frosty windows. I called it the People's Gala. There were no gowns or tuxedos, just scarves knitted by Mrs. Graham and hand-sewn vests from the tailor who used to fix Jonathan Mitchell's suits. There was a tree not towering and expensive, but made of wood scraps, painted by kids, covered in handprints and paper stars. I lit the top star myself, and when I looked out at the crowd that night, I didn't see revenge anymore. I saw healing, love, a legacy. That same night, just after midnight, a quiet knock echoed against the old ballroom doors. It was Jonathan. He held a letter. I know I have no right, he said, but I wanted you to have this. Inside, a handwritten note. You were always better than they saw you. I see it now. Thank you for becoming everything I wasn't brave enough to be. I nodded. That was all I needed. 1 year later, the ballroom is now listed as one of the most visited cultural sites in the region. Rosewood has its own community newsletter. An Evergreen Home? It's expanding with funding from the ballroom's profits and grants I never thought I'd understand, let alone win. I now stand in front of young girls who look like I once did and tell them, they said I wasn't made for this. So I rebuilt what they said I'd never own and gave it to those who never had a chance. I wear no crown, but every star on that paper Christmas tree is brighter than gold. This is not just revenge, this is resurrection. Reflective questions for you. Do you think Amelia ever truly forgave Jonathan? Would you have done the same if you were in her place or gone even further? Is healing more powerful than revenge? Subscribe to more revenge stories. Share, like, comment.